Hi everyone, welcome back in another video where we're going to be creating this amazing sidebar with this cool animation and this cool design. And here, when I click outside of the sidebar, it automatically closes. So I'm going to click on this to get the sidebar back. And we are going to be learning a lot of things from just this little project. Of course, we're going to be learning the styling, how you will style the whole thing. And also we are going to be adding those icons and also this button. So everything is related to styling. It's going to be so simple in this video. I'm going to show you everything step by step. Another element that I want to show you that we are going to be using in this video is the React DOM or React Router DOM library to manage the pages. Like for example, when I click on orders, I get to the orders because it is already opened. And when I go to the payments, for example, I go to the payments page. So I'm gonna show you everything, and also you will learn a lot of things in this video. So if you want to learn how to create this sidebar, stick with me till the end of this video. Here we are in our Visual Studio Code, and here is our initial setup. I created a sidebar component that is returning empty divs. And also we have the sidebar.css file for styling. It is empty at the moment. And make sure to import it here to apply the stylings. And of course, we need to call the component sidebar in the app.js. And before we move on in our process of creating this project, I want to mention something very important. The process that I'm going to follow to create these videos, instead of typing and create at the same time, what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a portion of the project, then I'm going to explain deeply the code behind each part, and then I'm going to move on to make the video a little bit shorter and go straight to the code. With that being said, let's get started. So as you can see here, I added first this icon, and the idea that I want to create when I click on this button, the slide bar slides out to the left, and when I click outside of it, it slides back. And I'm going to show you how I created that. First, I created this div with the class name bars button, and inside of it, I'm using the font awesome library with this icon, and you can use whatever library you would like. And I highly recommend to use the MUI library. It's completely for free. It's something that I recently discovered. And here in our sidebar.cs, as you can see, our styling, it's totally basic. I added for the font size 25 pixel, the margin to put it here. The cursor is pointer, so I can, when I point over the icon, I get this icon. So the display is flex and the position is absolute. Next, I created this empty sidebar, as you can see. And I'm gonna go over to the CSS to show you what I did to make it look like this. So the first property we have is width for 40%, and I used the percent measure so I can make sure that the sidebar always be resizable and adapts to the window's width. Like for example, when I open the window, as you can see, I'm still having this empty space at the left, and the same for if I shrink the window. And of course, the height is going to be 100%. The position is fixed, and I used it as fixed. So to make sure that the sidebar is always at the top. And secondly, the height of the sidebar is not dependent on the height of the body. And next we have the shadow to give it a good look. The top and the left are 0 pixel, and of course the background is white. And I want to show you something here in our app.js, and I added a bit of code here. Those are state variables that we are going to use to open and close the sidebar. And also we are using the onClick event listener. So when we click on the bars icon, it opens up. And what we are doing here, we are creating the handle click function to get triggered when I click on the button. And what we are doing here, we are reversing the state. So when it's false, it gets to true. And when it is true, it goes back to false. And now, as you can see, when I click on this icon, it opens up. But when I click on the sidebar, it closes. So that's what I'm going to explain right now. But normally, just for at this stage of this project, what I'm doing to close the sidebar, I'm just clicking on the sidebar. But normally, I need to click here, and I'm going to work on that. But now, let's go over the logic that I created to make that work. And I'm going to start with this line. And as you can see, here I'm adding those two props is opened and set is opened. And so what I'm doing here, I'm passing down those variables, those state variables to the sidebar component so we can be able to rely on them to open the sidebar or not. So here's our state variable as a prop, and here in this line we are going to use it whether to open the sidebar or not. So here is the turning operator. So if it is opened, we are going to add this open class to the main class. If it's not, it's going to be empty. And then we need to change our sidebar.css, and that's what I did. So the first thing that I did is I set the width to 0%, and here is our open class. And when it is true, we are going to trigger this, and the width is going to be 40%. And of course, I had to add the transition to make this smooth slide. And this is what's happening here. When I click on it, this is what's happening. This is the slide animation. And when I click on it, it closes. And here also we have the set is opened prop, and we are using it to change the state. So here when I click, this is what gets triggered. So it is when I click on the icon, it is true. And when I click on the sidebar to close it, it is false again because of this line. And when it is happening, it goes up to the parent component to change the state is opened to false. So this is our basic logic that we are using to open and close the sidebar, and I hope that you understood this. It cannot be a little bit complicated, especially for people who just getting started with the React. But as you build projects, you will get used to that, and it's gonna be something very normal. So next, I added successfully the logic of opening and closing the sidebar, as you can see. So when it is closed, when this button is clicked, the sidebar is opened, and when I click outside of it, it closes. And also you notice that we have this black layer under the sidebar, which making the look of the sidebar more professional. And that's what is used in the modern application and UI design. So let's go back to our code. I'm going to explain everything that I did step by step. So the first thing that I did is I used the useRef hook so I can be able to access to this element inside the DOM because we are going to use it to know whether we're clicked on the sidebar or not. So, and also we are going to use the use effect hook. So we can be able to load up all this logic when the component is loaded. And we are using this array dependency, the is opened variable to rely upon with to render the, the component. So let's go into what's happening here inside the use effects. So the first thing that I added, as you can see, I added the click event listener to the whole document. That's the first step. And next here, we are using the return function, meaning that we are cleaning up the mess, kind of, meaning that we are suppressing the click event listener when when we are exiting the use effect. And also this function handle outside click, it is triggered whenever we're adding this event. And I'm gonna go into this function, and this line means that every element that is clicked outside of the sidebar, that's why we're using the useRef. If it is clicked or when we are clicking on it or on the document and it is outside of the sidebar, we are going to set the is opened variable to false. So if it is this condition is true, that's why we are using the exclamation, sorry. And here what I want to explain is this black background, this soft black background that we have in here. So what I did first, I added this div and I called it black background. Simple as that. And I'm using the turning operator and I'm relying upon again the is opened to whether add the open class or not into the CSS. And I'm gonna go back to my CSS and what you can see here, the styling of this soft background. Of course, the width is going to be 100%. The same for the height. The background is going to be black. I set the position fixed to not be dependent on the body. And also the top is going to be 0 pixel. The visibility is hidden. And for to make it soft, we're using the opacity 0.5. And when the open is added or the class open is added, we are going to make it visible. So this is what's happening. It is working pretty much smoothly. I'm so happy with that so far with this project. And I'm gonna add more code and I'm going to explain later. And before I move on, I forgot to explain one last thing with this button because it's super important, otherwise it's not gonna work. So if I go back to my app.js, as you can see here, I'm adding this line. So what that means, stop propagation. So what that means is, as we saw, when we add in the click event listener to the whole document, normally we need something that will protect this button kind of. So that's where the stop propagation comes in. So big because when it is happening, when we're adding the click event listener to the whole document, we can't, when we are going to click again on it, it's not going to work. So the sidebar is not going to open. So that's where this function comes in, event.stopPropagation. So I hope you understand this whole logic because it is very useful in many situations that you may encounter in the production of your projects. So as you can see here, I added some element. So everything is working fine yet. And the first thing that I'm going to start with is this line. And what I did first, I created this div with the class name profile container. And when I go to my CSS file, here is its styling. So the height is 230 pixel and the display is flex, the align item center, justify content center. So this is the box that we have here. And in order to create this line, what we are going to do is using the before pseudo element. So the content, of course, is going to be nothing. The height is going to be 1 pixel to create this line. The bottom is going to be 0 pixel to be here. The opacity is going to be 0.5 to make it less apparent. And of course, the width is 100% and the position must be absolute to be able to position it in this place. So now I'm gonna start talking about this. This is gonna be for the profile image. And to do so, what I did, I created a separate functional component called user profile. And here is the files. Here's the user profile.js and its CSS. So in order to make it work, I'm gonna explain this line. Of course, this need to be inside the profile container that I just explained. And what this means, it means that only if is opened is true, we are going to call the user profile component. That's why when we click here and the sidebar is closed, it's not appearing. And when I click back here, it is appearing because of this line. And user object is just a prop. We are passing a user object. And here it is. It is the name, my name, and we're passing the profile image. Because we are passing two elements, we need to use an object. And I'm gonna go to the user profile function. As you can see, here is our user object. And also, as you can see here, I'm using the user object.name property to show the name. And here we have some class names to be able to style this. And I'm going to go to the user profile.css. And here is the styling, nothing fancy. We did this user profile container. That's what's wrapping those two elements. So the display need to be flex. The flex direction need to be column so that the items are at the top of each other. And we are using justify content as center to be able to center those elements. The same for the align items and the gap. I did 20 pixels to have a little bit of gap between those two elements. And for the user profile image, I make it rounded by using the border radius 50 pixel and the height and the width, as you can see. And at this time, I'm just using the background color because here I need to use the image tag, but it's not for now. Probably I'm going to do it at the end. So that's pretty much for this section. I'm going to continue working on my project. Then I'm going to explain everything that I did step by step. So this is our sidebar. This is how it is looking so far by adding those categories. So I'm going to go to my code to explain what I did to make this. So the first thing that I added this div with the class name categories container, and inside of it, the show categories. The categories container is the box here, and it is hidden, of course. And we are putting inside of it the show categories component. But also here, as you noticed, I'm using the same condition as the user profile because if I do this alone, it's going to be shown always. And this is something that I don't want. I want only to appear when the sidebar is open. That's why we're using this condition. If is opened is true, then show or call this function. So this is the function show categories, and I put it outside of the sidebar. And that's a good practice, by the way, in React. You don't want to put a lot of code inside or nested code because that's not looking good. And if problem happens, it's going to be very hard to fix. So here in our show categories, as you noticed, I created an array with the objects that represent the categories here with the ID, the name, and the icon. And I'm using the Font Awesome library. So here we are mapping through each object of the categories list. And here we are showing first the icon with the Font Awesome icon component. And the category.icon is the property representing this icon object. So for the orders, we have this icon. For the your wish list, we have this icon, and so on. And this is, of course, the category.name. So right now, let's jump into our CSS to make this styling. So we are going to start with the categories container that represents this box. It's not appearing, of course. I'm using the margin top 30 pixel to add a little bit of space and to push down those categories a bit. And of course, the padding 50 pixel to position the categories as you can see here. And next we have the single category class name. Here is our category, single category class name that represents each item, and I'm using this styling. So I'm using the display, for example, justify content center and align content center so you can be able to center vertically and horizontally those elements. Of course, I'm using the padding 10 pixel, so nothing complex here. The category name, I set it to 100% of its width. And in order to give this kind of grid look, I'm using the width 12 pixel of the icon. And I change the color. And you can play with the colors and your styling wherever you would like, depending on your project. So as you can see here, we pretty much finished our project. So the things left that I need to add, first I need to add a button, a logout button. And also I need to add an image, of course. And also I'm going to add routing by using React router. So when I click on category, we are going to the page that represents this category. For example, when I click on orders, I'm going to the page orders and so on. So one last thing that is bothering me beside the things that I said that I'm going to add is this transition. I want to add also a transition of this object and for the categories as well. So when I click on this icon and the sidebar opens, I want also the same transition from right to left to happen for these objects. So as you can see, here's our final result of our sidebar in terms of its design. The only thing that is left is the routing. But as you can see, I did a lot of changes here, a lot of updates in terms of styling, starting from those curvy edges, as you can see. And also I added this orange border of the user profile. And also I added the icons, as you can see here. And with this animation, when I hover over each category, as you can see, it is getting a little bit bigger. And finally, the button. And here, what you can see when I click on this button and the sidebar opens up, we have this little animation and transition for all the components. I'm going to do it again, and as you can see, we have the button and also those elements gets this smooth transition from left to right, giving it a cool look when the sidebar is opened. So let's start with our user profile component. And the first thing that I added the image, of course, and this is how I added it inside the user profile image. And here, as you can see in the source, we have the profile image, which is this from the path, which is this path. And this is our image. And I'm going to go over the CSS file to make it look like this, because first, when you add it, the image gets bigger and outside of the scope of the profile image container. So we had to make some changes to make it look like this and stay within the parent container. So by doing this, I just added the width and the height as 100% and the border radius 50%. So now let's get into the important thing, which is how we can be able to create, or how I created this orange border. By doing so, I had to use the before pseudo element because that's going to be always linked to the parent container, which is the user profile image, the image itself. So the first thing that I did, I added the absolute as a position. The border radius need to be 50%, of course, to make it rounded. And here, as you can see here, it is something a bit strange because the width and the height is above 100% because when you create that, first it gets behind, it is positioned behind the image. That's why we're using, uh, sorry, it is after the image. So that's why I added the z index -1 to be behind of it. And in order to make it a little bit wider, because it is hidden, that's why I used the height and the width 114%. And I added the top and the left as -8 pixel just to position it at the center. And of course, to create this white border, rounded border, I just added this line, 5 pixel, solid and white. So that is pretty much how I updated the user profile. So now let's talk about the categories and how I did this styling and how I added the icons. So first, I'm gonna jump back over our sidebar.js because this is where the categories are. And as I explained, that's why I used the objects inside an array to be able to add stuff properties without any problem. So this is how I added those icons for each object. So this is the icon object from the Font Awesome library. And those are the icons that I used. You can find them in their website. So here I'm gonna go at the bottom, and as you can see here, so the first element is the icon. We're using the category.icon property. And the second element, we are using the name property of the category list array. So in order to make them appear like this, so I'm gonna open this up and go to the sidebar.css. So let's go straight into the, so what is the name? The name is single category. So I'm going to go to the single category to show you how I did the position. Oh, here it is. So in order to make this position like the icon and next to its name, I use the display as flex. The gap is 31 pixel. And of course, I added these properties to make them centered vertically and horizontally inside the single container, which is this container like this. And of course, I added the hover state to have this little animation. And here is the category name. I did the width as 100%. And the icon, I set the width to 12 pixel so we can have them aligned like this, and the same for the names. And now to animate the categories. So I'm gonna start first with our CSS. And as we saw, inside the categories component, which is show categories, we have the main container, which is the categories container. So that's what we are going to use in order to animate the whole thing inside it. So what I did, I just added those lines. So the first thing, it's going to be 0 of the scale x from the property transform. And also I'm going to use the tyranny operator, this condition. So when it is opened, then show it by using the same property. And that's why we are getting this kind of rotation, because we are using the scale x. And in order to create this transition, we are using this line to give it this smooth transition when it is opened up. So as you can see right now, the sidebar is looking so much good because of the animation, and also the design is pretty clean and pretty neat. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to work on the routing. So when I click on each category, I'm gonna go to the path or the page of each category. Also, another thing that I wanna show you are those tyranny operators. As you can see here, I already did some of them, but I wanna show you the same for the button. Here is our button, the custom button component for this button, and I created this custom button component here. And I'm using the same logic when it is opened, call this button. Only call this button when the variable is opened is true. And I'm using the same logic here in its parent container. So nothing complex here. And I'm gonna show you how I did the transition. So I'm gonna start with, I'm gonna just explain for the categories because the same applies for the user profile and the button. So for the categories container, which encompasses all those categories, and I used it to create this animation. So the first thing that I did, I added this line, the scale x0, and when it is open, meaning when we add the open class, it's going to be 1. So first it's going to be hidden and it's going to appear. So that's what's giving us this animation, as you can see, because it is 0.2 second long. It is very fast, so I'm going to make it just a little bit longer. Save the file and start again. And as you can see, this animation, this smooth animation, and it's a little bit longer this time, and you can adjust it depending on your needs. So the same thing that I did for the button. So finally, here we are in our final section of our project. And as you can see here, I added some bit of code just for the routing logic of our clicked categories. And in order to do so, of course, I had to use the React Router DOM library. And I'm going to show you how to use it because it is something that is not built in React library. You gotta install it. You have to go to this website, the npm website, and that's our React Router DOM page. And all you have to do is to copy this and go back to your Visual Studio Code and open up your terminal. So I'm gonna do it again here. So we are waiting that our terminal to load up, and you are going to copy this and hit enter. So I'm not going to do this because I already installed it. And now let's start explaining how I did this. So I'm going to first show you how it is working. So for example, if I click on your wish list, I'm gonna open the window up so you can see everything because I wanna show you in the address bar when I click on the wish list, the path changes your wish list. And the same for payment, as you can see here, and the same for settings. So I'm gonna go back to my orders page. And before I start working on or explain the logic of routing, I wanna explain something that you have to do is creating the pages for each element. You gotta create a pages for it or a functional component for it because this is where you are going to put in the code for each element. So in order to do so, first I created the pages folder just for structuring your project clearly. And for each element, I created its own folder, and inside the folder, its functional components. For example, when I click on orders.js, as you can see, I'm having a bit of styling, just the internal styling. I didn't want to use the CSS because I wanted just to go a little bit faster with this, just to show you the basic elements of using the routing logic. So here I'm just using or returning the orders text, and here I'm using the order style variable to style the element. So everything is simple. So that that's for how we can create our page or our pages. I'm going to go back to my app.js. So this is where the router logic is functioning. So the first thing that you need to do, you need to wrap your whole code within the browser router element. So that's what we are doing here. And the second thing, you need to create the routes elements, and inside of it, for each element or for each link, you need to create to use the route element, and inside of it, or we are using the prompts path and element. So the path, this is our path that we are going to use, and this is the functional component that we are going to trigger by using the element property. So for the path orders, we are triggering the orders functional components. That's the thing that I just show you in the pages folder. So that's the basic logic of how you can use the router React DOM. So that's for our project in this video. So I think that we created a complete sidebar. So all you have to do is to adjust it based on your project, on the thing that you want to create. So that's the basic idea of how you can create this cool sidebar. And also we added another thing, which is the routing. So all you have to do is to modify the pages based on your needs. So that's it for our this video. I hope that you got some value from it. And if you have some suggestions and something that I need to improve in these videos, you can leave the comments down below in the section. So thank you again for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.